Giant dropped the new Stormgate trailer on the opening night of Gamescom. It has people talking about the quality of the trailer and also the polish of the game itself. It's no secret that they're a small studio with a fraction of the headcount of a company like Blizzard or EA, and this will show in its marketing, in its trailers. I'm a firm believer that gameplay is king, and as long as you can produce a game which is fun, with well-designed underlying mechanics and systems, then you can improve the graphics over time, you can expand the scale of the project. In recent years, we've seen a number of small studios create truly epic scale games with a relatively small team. They've been quite creative in the way they've done this, using various design techniques, and also community interaction, getting the player base, the fan base, to help them create content for the games. In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the most successful examples of this. I'm going to cover some of the techniques that Stormgate may already be using and also could consider using. There was a great comment on my previous video talking about how Valve have really struck gold with the Steam Workshop and the idea of community-created skins for CSGO and Dota 2. You can check out my video on CSGO skins if you want to learn more, but basically, when you play the game, you can unlock crates full of weapon skins for your in-game guns, and these are then unlocked using keys, which you have to purchase for a fixed price from Valve, and a portion of the revenue from that goes to the skin creator. And each crate is full of skins created by the community. The actual specifics in terms of the revenue split have been a closely guarded secret by Valve, but essentially a large chunk will go to Valve for every opening of a crate, and a portion will go to the skin creators, and the remainder will go to fund the prize pool for professional esports tournaments. There's also a secondary market, the Steam Marketplace, where you can buy and sell individual skins or the crates themselves, and when these transactions take place, again, there's a cut, and a portion of that cut is going to skin creators. In a large and popular game like CSGO, the sort of benchmark is if you have your skin included in one of the crates, you can expect to make maybe $40,000. And there are some people whose Steam Workshop is full of 11, 12, 13 approved skins. So for these people, it's been a full-time career the past 7 or 8 years. Now, obviously, the sort of elephant in the room is that nobody wants skins, nobody gives a stuff about skins if the underlying game is not good, it's not popular, it's not fun. So for this to work for Stormgate, Giant will have to make a good game in the first place. Assuming they can create a game that people want to play, I think this community-created content path is one they should really pursue. There's a lot of potential here. You can have skins for units, we can have reskins for the user interface, which is something StarCraft 2 did. We can have decals, so represent your favorite team or some sort of logo on your buildings. Maybe even you'll have some sort of commander unit or some profile to customize in the game. So you could have a custom portrait, custom clothing, etc. I think the next really important thing, particularly for the competitive scene, is as early as possible to involve community map makers and to make the tools for map making as inclusive and easy to use as possible. We saw in StarCraft 2 that when community and professional map makers became involved in the tournament map pools, the quality of the games in the competitive scene improved dramatically. Now, obviously, StarCraft 2 had a very enthusiastic and engaged community, and we had things like the Team Liquid map making contest, community-led initiatives. I think Giant need to get on the front foot with this. They need to come out the gate storming. They need to have their own map making contests with their own prizes for the community. These don't have to be necessarily large financial outlays. It could be skins. It could be just, the credit being immortalized in the game, or a small prize. The key thing to realize is that beyond maybe single player campaign content and obviously co-op, the best competitive 1v1, 3v3 esports kind of maps probably going to come from outside Giant Studios. It's going to come from people who are deep in the professional scene, whose sole focus is map making. And I think it would be a mistake for them to hang on to the map making responsibility entirely themselves, because it will just be a massive time sink and will not necessarily result in the best maps. While I think that maps will always need the human touch, think it's too hard to create a well-balanced competitive map with the nuances and everything to do with sort of unit ranges and line of sight and rush distances. I think there is scope in other parts of the game for the introduction of procedurally generated content. So essentially using AI to create sort of randomized content, which adds replayability and allows large amounts of game material to be created without having to physically dictate what the parameters will be for these. If you look at all the successful indie games, games developed by a very small team, sometimes even one-man bands, sort of common thread will be that there'll be an element of procedurally generated content within these. So they'll create an engine, they'll create the sort of underlying gameplay mechanics, but then it'll be fleshed out with randomized content, often combined with the idea of roguelike gameplay, which is where it's punishingly difficult. So it kind of promotes replayability because quite often you'll come unstuck and have to restart the game kind of idea. It's not immediately obvious to me where these principles could apply to an RTS like Stormgate, but I definitely think it's worth some further consideration and some real thought, because maybe the most powerful way to make a small game into a big game without having to hire hundreds of people. Just some ideas off the top of my head would be, if you think of a game like Faster Than Light, where you sort of hop from one planet to the next, or from one star system to the next, and each time you arrive, you'll be faced with a new scenario, a new enemy, or a new reward or item, or a new shop. And maybe you could have some sort of single player campaign in Stormgate where you go from one map to the next, face randomized opponents, and there are different prizes at stake, or different objectives in each. That, and also maybe some kind of survival map where you're facing waves and waves of enemies, and those could be randomized in terms of their composition, things like that. When you look at indie games, it's very common that maybe they'll be the creator of the game and they've got an idea for a story in mind, but they've got no idea how to make music or to do artwork or animations. And often they will hire freelancers, or they will pay for assets in order to flesh out their games. Nowadays, even large game studios don't try to create an engine from scratch themselves. They'll often license an engine, such as the Unreal Engine, which underpins hundreds of well-known games. So I think when you, as a studio, have very specific requirements in terms of needing a particular contribution to your game, then it could be a very smart option to bring in freelancers or to buy specific assets that you need. So for example, CrossGiant need help with the story. They brought in freelancer Nikki Nielsen, who is very experienced on working with AAA titles from Blizzard. Maybe because they're like a one-game studio, as opposed to having several titles in development simultaneously, they maybe don't have the resources to hire, say, full-time music producers. So they can turn to freelancers there as well. This is certainly not anything to be seen as a red flag. If anything, it's encouraging. And even large AAA studios have moved to this model in some cases. Notable example would be Square Enix, where their legendary composer, Nobuo Uematsu, is now a freelancer, working across several titles with several studios. So what we know from the recent Gamescom trailer and subsequent tweets, or X's, I mean, what the hell do you call it now? Jesus Christ. Anyway, they're working with Frank Klepacki, who's famous for Command & Conquer and Dune soundtracks. That's great news. And they're also working with Chainsmokers, which are an electronic music duo. So bringing in expertise from outside, they can't have them as full-time employees, but they can use their expertise. I think that's a win. Now, I think there were definitely some naysayers after that Gamescom trailer talking about the sort of perceived lack of polish, or it's embarrassing, blah, blah, blah. And maybe CrossGiant can think about outsourcing the production of trailers, the voiceover, the sort of general marketing side of things. Maybe some of the fans in the community perceiving them as maybe a bit naive, a bit lacking in that regard. That's definitely one to think about. But I'm not worried in terms of the quality of the game itself. So in summary, I think CrossGiant are doing a very good job making some smart decisions and making the most of the resources they have in order to try and create the best and the biggest game they possibly can. I think it will come down to just a continued focus on the quality of the gameplay itself, and the level of interaction with the community. I think the more they can be involved with the community and help to encourage community-created content, the easier their job's going to become. I've left a link here for another Stormgate-related video, which I think you'll find interesting, and also the sub button. So if you do like this kind of content and you'd be interested in more, then it's well worth subscribing, and I'd appreciate it.